I'm Jason Brown. I'm the Vice President for Advancement and University Relations here at the University of Houston downtown. It is a privilege to welcome you all today and to have the opportunity to work alongside the President and so many dedicated colleagues that help us put these amazing programs together. As many of you know, the President's Lecture Series is a signature initiative that brings our campus and surrounding communities together to explore ideas and engage in thoughtful dialogue around some of the most pressing issues of time, but also share the stories of Houston, and that's why we're here today. At UHD, we take great pride in being a place where diverse perspectives are valued and where open conversations not only encouraged, but celebrated. This platform allows us to connect with industry leaders, policy experts, and change makers, all with the goal of better preparing ourselves and making this city as great or even greater. So thank you for being here. Today's program celebrates an extraordinary family story rooted right here in Houston, a story of perseverance, cultural contribution, and legacy. We are honored to feature Robert Gondo, president of Tokyo Gardens, a beloved Houston establishment with a powerful family history that stretches across generations. Today's lecture will feature a featured conversation moderated by one of our favorite moderators here at UHD, Ms. Miya Shay, who is no stranger to the UHD community. And we'll also follow up with a Q&A session, so if we have any questions for Robert or Miya or whoever, we've got some mics in the back, to help you project your voice. And my phone's going off. I don't know why. Probably spam calls. So now it is my great honor to introduce the president of the University of Houston downtown to share his remarks. Dr. Blatcher.
Thank you so much, and a firm welcome to all of you here today. So this is our fourth installment for this year of our President's Lecture Series, and it's the final one before the summer. For those of you who have been participating in our President Lecture Series, they just seem to get better and better. And today, I know, is going to be no different, largely because we're here to learn about the remarkable story of Mr. Gondo's grandparents, Eugene and Hisako Gondo. Their story is part a World War II story, part a Houston story, and in part a story of incredible resilience in humanity. We are all in some way familiar with World War II and its consequences, often through participation in lectures or readings, but Robert Gondo's World War II lessons came from primary sources, and not just sources located through extensive research. His lessons came directly from his grandparents, who not only survived internments during World War II and lived to tell about it, but who went on to introduce Japanese cuisine and culture to Houston when they opened Tokyo Gardens in 1966 as Houston's first Japanese restaurant and sushi bar. Today, they are HEB's sole provider of sushi, which I'm sure many of us have taken advantage of. I did last night. As always, our President's Lecture Series aims to bring thought-provoking content from informed guests whose work sparks both a conversation and inquiry. In recognition of Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month, the legacy of Eugene and Hisako Gondo should serve as a reminder to all of us that our city is really a beautiful tapestry of cultures once divided, and a testament that healing and progress are always possible, even after deep upset, trauma, and social or political unrest. Today's fireside chat, as you just heard a few moments ago from Jason Brano, will be led by our Emmy Award-winning Houston journalist and someone who is no stranger to UHD, I'm so happy about, Ms. Miya Shay. Ms. Shay has been a trusted voice on ABC 13 for more than 20 years, delivering impactful stories that resonate across the region. She currently covers Houston's city government and breaking news. She was born in China. She's one of many Asian Americans who now contribute meaningfully and with integrity to the culture and intellectual capital of the United States, and certainly to Houston, Texas. She's a graduate of Syracuse University with a degree in broadcast journalism and a minor in Asian history. Miya has the great honor of being able to work in a lot of different places, including New York, Alabama, Kansas, and Michigan. I'm sure she'll say that her favorite is Texas. Her career has taken her around the globe, covering international stories in China, Brazil, Korea, and Japan. A true Texan, Miya is deeply engaged in the Houston community and its many civic events and forums. She's married to Texas State Representative Gene Wu, and together they're raising 2 sons. Please join me in welcoming here Mr. Robert Gondo, and in welcoming back Ms. Miya Shay.
All right, thank you so much. It's always an honor to be here at UHD, even though today I was like parking garage challenged, but don't hold that against me. And I'm thrilled to be able to lead this conversation with Robert Gondo and his family because, first of all, Robert's mom's here. Say hi, Mom.
Yeah. Hi, Mom.
Yay, Kathy. And also, who has had HEB sushi? Yes, we all have, yes.
Not all hands went up, okay.
We will correct that. No. Actually, I think it's so interesting because so many of us, maybe that's our sort of the easy foray, especially for my kids, into sushi and Japanese cuisine. But it's almost like working backwards, Robert, because your family's history is so long and varied. So if you would just start us from the beginning, what can you tell us about your grandparents, Eugene and Hisako Gondo, and their journey ending up here in Houston?
Well, I'm a 4th generation Japanese American. So what that means is, or the way that we interpret that, is my grandparents were born in the United States. My grandmother was born in Hawaii. My grandfather was born in Seattle. And a few years after that, they actually went back to Japan for education and then came back as adults to the United States and found work in California. And they worked on a farm. They had a farm in the middle of California, and around that time was when the war came out, and then were asked by the government to pack up their bags and move to an internment camp. So
They weren't asked, they were told.
Well,
Yeah, all right, yeah.
yeah, they were told, and the thing was that they could only carry 2 suitcases worth of stuff. Whatever they had, they could only leave with 2 bags, and because they were in the camp, they weren't making any money, so they weren't able to pay the mortgage on the farm, so they lost the farm.
Mm. And how many years were they in the camp?
I think two or 3 years. I want to say.
And then do you remember, did they ever tell you stories, or did you hear it from your father, Glenn, about some of these stories?
Well, so actually they met in camp.
Oh.
So out of all the terrible things that happened there, they did find love and met in camp. And so one of the things, though, that they never really talked about it. That's what you hear all the time from Japanese Americans who
It's kind of like the Asian way, right? Like Japanese, Chinese, I feel like my grandparents didn't tell me stuff,
It's really sad, and that's why I think it's important to have these spaces to talk about this, because my grandparents never talked about the war. They always wanted their kids, my parents, to grow up and be just regular American kids. They spoke English to them. They didn't teach them Japanese, and so whatever happened during the war was basically never spoken about again. And so I discovered this through talking to other people, learning on my own, because they wouldn't tell me what happened. I knew that I had a great uncle. I guess my grandfather's brother was in the 442, which was this Japanese only, or a regiment of Japanese Americans who were fighting in World War II, fighting for the U.S. They fought in Europe, and that's what David Ono talked about.
Right, and David Ono spoke last year, so if you were
Yeah.
at the presidential lecture series last year, he spoke extensively about the 442.
Yeah, and again, I did not know a lot about my great uncle Abe Fuji. So when I was little, people would say, "Oh yeah, I had a grandfather who fought in World War II," and I would say, "Yeah, I did too," and they were like, "Huh."
Were they like, did you feel like they were questioning which side he fought for, right?
Yeah, and I didn't know, so I had to go back and ask, like, okay, so yeah, there was this war, so tell me about that, like, which side? They said he fought for the Americans. I said, wait, really? Wait, how was that possible? I didn't know that. And even the history books, they don't really talk about the 442 and all their accomplishments and all the things that they did to really turn the tide for the Allies in the war. and my great uncle had a big part in that. And so that was like a discovery that I didn't make until many years after after growing up about that. And this is my own family's history that I didn't know. And again, because my grandparents kept quiet about it and they didn't want to talk about those things. They wanted to move on and live out life. But there's such a rich history, so many lessons to learn. What's happening today echoes of things that happened in the past. And that's why we need to talk about these difficult subjects, because we don't want that to happen again.
No, I think so important, especially for Asian Americans, these alien land laws that's been proliferating around the country and just passed in the legislature here in Texas. It really echoes that, because it doesn't single out Japanese Americans. This is Chinese, North Koreans, Iranians, and Russians, but in Texas, the Texas law, but you can easily see how that could keep going.
Right, and so that's why we want to tell these stories, because it's happening right now, and like you said, it's happened in Florida, it could happen here, or they're trying to make it happen here, and people what we don't realize is that it really wasn't that long ago. It really wasn't, because my grandparents, my aunt was born in the internment camps. So.
And even in the internment camps, what we learned from David Ono and a lot of the other folks who really looked into it, these folks had all their rights taken away, and if they had kids, if they had young men in the internment camps, a lot of times they sent their sons from the internment camps to go serve and die. I mean, it's almost to prove, like, as if they are worthy, that they are worthy of being Americans, even though you guys have been here for generations,
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, they shouldn't have had to prove anything, because they were citizens. They were
Right.
American citizens, and all the hardship that they went through, they just didn't talk about it.
Even your father, I don't remember, when I've asked him over the years, he was reluctant to talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's because I'm sure like his parents didn't really speak about it very much, because it was something that they were happy to have made it out alive and to have been given the opportunity. And what they said was, is that, despite all of that, America is still a great place, because they were able to start all over, build a successful business, move out of California, come here to Texas, and do something incredible.
And how did they end up in Texas? It says here that they founded the Tokyo Gardens in 1966. So tell us how that came to be.
So they did a number of things after the war, and in fact, they started a Chinese restaurant in L.A. That one didn't work out.
Now it's like Chinese people open a lot of Japanese restaurants, but
Yeah. So in the early 60s, Japan Food Corporation, JFC, is like one of the largest distributors for Japanese and Asian food products in America. And they had a relationship with the president, who was in San Francisco at the time. And they said, we're opening up a distribution center in Texas. Why don't you go open up a restaurant? Because we'd like some customers. And so they decided to lean in and open a restaurant in Dallas. And so the first one was actually in Dallas in 1962, and that was the first sushi bar in Texas. And you would think that you must be absolutely crazy to do that. Like, why would you open a Japanese restaurant in Texas? You're in California. There's plenty of Japanese restaurants there. And it's kind of like that old joke about the shoe salesman who goes to Africa. And I won't tell it because it's outdated, but it's exactly why, there aren't any Japanese restaurants in Texas. So let's be the first and do something incredible. So they opened in 62 in Dallas, 66 in Houston, and ended up opening several other restaurants around the country. But the largest one was here in Tokyo, in Houston, called Tokyo Gardens.
And tell us where it was located. And it wasn't just like a strip center you went into a restaurant, but it was like an experience.
Yeah. So Tokyo Gardens was on Westheimer, and this was on the outskirts of town. It was right on Westheimer and 610.
So far away. Out in the country.
And back then Westheimer was a 2-lane road. So That's how you have to kind of, if you can imagine it. It was an old Chevrolet dealership. So it was actually a really big space. They gutted the whole thing, flew in Japanese architects and builders to design and construct the space inside to look like a traditional Japanese-built wooden frame construction home or building. There was a koi pond in the middle. We had Japanese koi fish, the colorful, they look like large goldfish, flown in and brought in to fill the pond. There was a sushi bar, of course, and a little stage where traditional Japanese dance was done nightly. There was a bar in the back, and I guess a club. And I'm not old enough to remember the club, but apparently it was really popular in the 70s, and it was just the cool place to be.
You weren't old enough? Or is that just a story you're telling? I'm kidding. So what was the reception like? What do your folks tell you about the reception like for in the 60s and 70s for folks to be exposed to sushi? I mean, now it's at the grocery stores, but back then it was like, whoa,
Back then, it was exotic. It was a discovery. It was something that people would go on an adventure because there wasn't a place like this. And I mean, you couldn't build that place today. Even like no new restaurant has this. It was the Japanese way of building homes and setting up the frames. You don't use nails. Everything's done and cut in particular ways to make it all hold together. By the way, it didn't hold up well over time, but that's how it was originally done. And you go to Japan, you'll see construction still done that way in the traditional manner. But that's what it looked like. And of course, you can't build like that anymore in Houston. So it was a really, really magical experience.
What was it like for you growing up in that environment as a child?
I gave hell to everybody else. I ran around because the space was really big and I was very, very little. And I would get lost in there and I would play hide and seek with my grandmother. And try to grab little bits of food from the kitchen whenever I could. I would work as a cashier during summers, and I got paid a healthy wage of 1 nickel for every ticket I punched, I think.
But it was all the sushi you can eat.
All the sushi, what's funny? So I actually didn't eat sushi until I was a little bit older. I thought I didn't like sushi back then, as a little kid, 5 or 6 years old. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that I was like, oh, no, this stuff is actually pretty good.
What do you remember what the reception was like for your family, kind of growing up, being the first and really leaders in not just for Japanese Americans, but for Asian Americans as a whole in the Houston region? I mean, your family's influence is far beyond food. His late father, Glenn Gondo, founded the first Asian Republican organization. Then he founded an Asian Democrat organization because he wanted Asians to be politically involved, to lead. So tell us what that was like for you to kind of see how your family kind of really embraced Houston, and did Houston sort of embrace it back? Were there challenges? What do you remember about those things?
Well, I think today we all know that Houston is incredibly diverse. It's probably the most diverse city in the world. Back then, it wasn't so diverse. And so for my parents and my grandparents, they stuck out. And my father used that, it wasn't, for him, it wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. He would go into a meeting and go into a room, be the only Asian person there, and people would remember who he was. Not only that, not just because of how he looked, but because of how he spoke. It was very rare to see an Asian person back then. It was even more rare to find an Asian person that spoke good English. And so that helped him be recognized and be remembered. And he didn't get offended. He didn't get irritated when people would make remarks or do things. It was important to be recognized as a good person, as a good citizen, and eventually that helped pave the way.
I think it's really interesting that you said about the whole rare for good English and things like that, because a lot of people outside of California, for many years, it's mainly newer immigrants that kind of populated the South from Asia. So people are not used to, or they don't think the stereotypes of Asian Americans who've been here for generations.
For generations. I mean, it's very different. The Japanese, you go to California, the Japanese community there is huge.
Right.
It's very small here. And so on the West Coast, there's plenty of Asian Americans, Japanese Americans that have been in the U.S. for a very, very long time. But in Texas, not so much.
And that's true even today.
Even today, yeah. I mean, there were some Japanese that settled here after the war, but it wasn't that many. You know, most of the camps in Colorado and Arizona, they went, you know, to California or to the East Coast. Some of them found opportunity here in Texas, of course.
Did your family? When did they? Do you ever hear about when they decided Houston was going to be home, like the forever home?
Forever home. Well, my grandparents made this their place first, and because they were moving back between Houston and Miami, because we had a restaurant in Miami at one point. And it wasn't until, so my parents moved here in '84. And that's when it became probably the forever home.
Because they were, even though you kind of grew up in the Houston restaurant, they also did other businesses around until they kind of settled back in Houston.
Before the '80s, my parents had moved around a lot. They had worked in New York in the diamond business. Believe it or not, there was a diamond trade between Europe, the U.S., and Japan, and diamonds were a new gemstone to Japan. It wasn't as popular. I think emeralds or other precious stones were very, very popular as jewelry. Diamonds were just becoming popular in the late '60s and '70s, and my grandfather found an opportunity, found a broker, and then wanted to set up a buying office in the United States. And so my dad and his brother went to New York and started going to Europe and buying diamonds and then selling them to Japan.
Right. But they eventually came back here in the '80s. So tell us about the sort of transition from Tokyo Gardens and sort of this exotic Japanese restaurant to sort of the modern version of your family business, now doing catering and all the kiosks we know so well, H-E-B and other places.
Yeah. So the restaurant closed in 1998. My grandmother was getting old and she wanted to retire. My grandfather had passed away several years before that, so she didn't want to do the business anymore. So we closed the restaurant, sold the property, and my grandmother moved out to California to live with her daughter. And
what's the property now? Do you know?
I think it's like a motel.
Okay.
I think so. Haven't driven by it lately.
Yeah, so surreal.
And so what my dad did when he became general manager of the restaurant was he started knocking on doors, hotels, the convention center, all these places to start building catering relationships. You know, the Westin Galleria was his first account. All these hotels that started doing more and more events wanted different types of food to offer. They didn't know how to make sushi, certainly. And so the restaurant began to offer that as a service. That's how our catering business got started.
And even today, I will say, like, basically, if you go to any major Houston hotel and get sushi, it's your sushi.
Yeah, that's the secret. So yes, if you most of the time it's us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if it tastes good. If it's not good, they didn't make
Yeah.
it.
If it's not good, I can give you other names. Yeah.
Yes.
So after the restaurant closed down, the chefs all needed work. The catering business actually continued because he would get in his van and bring a bunch of rice and host and go to events and continue to do parties. Around that same time, Continental Airlines launched their first direct flight from Houston to Tokyo, and that was in '99. And they needed someone to do the food for that flight, the Japanese food. So we started doing Japanese food for that flight, and that helped my parents move along for a couple of years. And then in 2001, there was just really a lucky circumstance where my dad got connected with someone from H-E-B and learned about my family's story, and they said, well, we're opening this new store in Friendswood, Texas, in a little bit. Would you like to do the sushi there? And they said yes.
And then it just took off. I mean, the formula, or tell me about the growth now. I mean, because if you think about it, it's 2001, so now it's been about 24 years. Tell me about the growth and how popular it got. Like, you guys hit it just at the right time. Really.
Well, we started with one store in Friendswood. Now we have 300 HEBs and 200 other locations. So it's grown steadily over the years. But it wasn't, so to set the context, if you go back 25 years, HEB is not what you think of it today. HEB was just entering the Houston market, and it really wasn't a well-known name. It wasn't a well-known brand, not in Houston at least. And so working with HEB, we were actually on the nervous side, because who is this? Like, all we know is Randall's. All we know is
but Kroger didn't call us.
Kroger. Yeah, and so like, well, who is this? So we were pretty nervous ourselves. But like you said, the first week that we opened, we broke all kinds of records, or we broke all kinds of expectations, and that's what led to getting, I think, 6 more stores the following year, and it just kept growing. HEB kept opening more stores in Houston, and we kept growing with them. And then they eventually said, well, we're in San Antonio. Can you add sushi in San Antonio? We said sure, and it grew from there.
What is it about your business or the way you guys operate that you think makes it so successful? I mean, first of all, the sushi tastes good. My kids like it. But what do you think? What is it about your business that made it such a good business partner for all these other entities?
I'll tell you a funny story. So a couple of months ago, we hosted some Japanese exchange students with A&M. They're studying agriculture. They want to work in food science. And I'm talking to this young student, and she says, "This is my first time to the United States." I said, "Wow, that's amazing." She said, "This is also the first time I've had a California roll." So that's a little bit about how sushi in America is different than sushi in Japan. And I think what we do better than anybody else is we serve Texans. I think that Texans eat differently than the rest of America. I think Texans shop differently, and I think that we try to understand what Texans want better than anybody else. And that's why our sushi is different than if you went to Japan. That's why you see flaming hot Cheetos on our roll. That's why you might find guacamole, corn, elote, lots of different things that you wouldn't think of as sushi, but it's adjacent and it's familiar, and it encourages you to give it a try because it has flavors that you might be familiar with in other foods, other cuisine. And we take inspiration from all different parts of Texas.
Because you also do like spring rolls and dumplings and poke bowls. That's also part of your repertoire, right?
And well, before we didn't do any of that. Before we didn't have spring rolls. Suddenly that became part. Now that's a mainstream part of our menu. We do poke bowls now. We have hot food. We do fried rice. We've expanded out. Now we kind of does everybody like orange chicken? So now we do orange chicken.
Wait, you do orange chicken?
We do orange chicken.
Where? Which one?
Some stores, not all stores.
Okay.
Not all stores.
Because I was like, I go to HEB like once a week, and I've not seen orange chicken, but maybe it's just not the HEB I go to.
Yeah. So we've kind of evolved in what we do. We used to think, we're just a sushi company. We're much more than a sushi company. We've expanded out to different categories. And now the food that we do is more broadly Asian food. But the core of our business is still sushi.
And then, so when people look at your company now, your family company, so successful, hundreds of HEB stores in all these hotels and other commercial enterprises, and of course, family's been working on this since the 60s, so it's not overnight success. But what are some of the lessons you've learned from your grandparents and your parents that sort of carry you over even to this day?
Well, the myth or the legend is that the recipe to cook the rice that we use today is my grandmother's recipe.
I like that.
But yeah, we've been doing Japanese food. I mean, we've been serving unfamiliar food for a very long time. And so I think with that experience gave my family the confidence to go forward and keep pushing and do the difficult thing, because like I said before, it's not easy to say, like, let's serve something that nobody's ever had before and see how it goes.
And do you think, and I don't know how in depth we've always thought about it, like the whole being Asian American and our psyche and sort of, you know, we talked earlier about how the grandparents and would not tell you things because they wanted you to move forward and not focus on the difficulties of the past. How do you think that affects how you do business or how the company has succeeded over the years? Is it because you guys are always willing to look forward, or maybe thinking, hey, whatever we're doing, it's hard, but it wasn't as hard as what, you know, your grandparents went through when they were young?
I think the difference, or the way I think about it is that I always have hope. You know, I always have hope for the future that, you know, even as weird and crazy as things are right now, I think tomorrow's going to be better, or at least the future is going to be better, because that's what my grandparents thought. That's how they felt. That whatever happened to us, you know, the future can be better, and we're going to work to make it better. And that's what I think. You know, we're doing something that I know we're just selling sushi, but I would go to a store and talk to customers, and they would and the first thing they say is, I don't like sushi, but my kids do. That's why I buy your sushi all the time. And then a couple of years later, I would go to a store and talk to a customer again, and someone would say, you know, our family loves your sushi, and now we go out to, you know, we go to a Japanese or an Asian restaurant once a month. You know, we love doing this because we tried HEB sushi. And then I was up in Dallas when we opened the first HEB in Dallas in Frisco, and a customer
Which
said,
they were all very excited about. I remember when that happened on social media. It was a big deal.
Absolutely crazy. People started camping outside at 3 o'clock the day before. And so this mother tells me, my daughter is going to be studying abroad in Japan. And it started because when she was a little girl, she tried our sushi.
Oh.
I think that's amazing. I mean, I don't want to go too far in saying how much sushi contributed, but I think that I'm really proud of what we're doing and the effect that it can have, and if we can impact customers like that in some very, very crazy way, then I think that's, you know, what keeps me going, keeps me wanting to do more. It inspires me to want to carry on what my grandparents have done.
And I also think, like, you know, what your father did a lot in our community is really sort of expanded the reach of Asian Americans and made sure that Asian Americans had a place at the table, not just in the sushi business, but in the community, that we were respected and that we were part of the conversation. How important is it for you, because we are at the tail end of AAPI month, to sort of I mean, I think your family business and just what it represents as a conduit to the Asian American story and our Asian American lived lives?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, the one thing that's unique about Houston is that all the different, you know, that's why it's Asian, not just Japanese American month. It's all Asians. And Houston, all the different groups come together. They're not separate. They're not doing different things. You know, my dad would go to events and support the Chinese Community Center or the Korean Community Center, and they would come show up for the Japan America Society things. Everyone in Houston, all the different groups would support each other, and I think that's unique because you go to other cities and you don't see that. You actually see factions. You see separate groups trying to promote their own thing and not wanting to help out other groups, other Asian groups. And you see that in Houston. I think that's what makes this place so special, because everyone comes together, and that's because you know, not just the work that my dad did, but what the people before him.
And also, your father started the Japan Festival.
The Japan Festival.
Which, if you haven't gone, you should go.
Yeah, which is great. Which now is in the fall, which means that it's the perfect weather. It's at Herman Park, and you know it was started because I think there was the Japanese government had made a gift to the city of Houston, and if you go to Herman Park, there's a small section in there where there's a Japanese garden, and my dad wanted a way to celebrate that and do something with the city to recognize it. And that's how the Japan Festival got started. And I think last year was the largest one yet. I think there were over 40,000 people that attended over the two-day weekend. So we're really proud of where that's come, and I hope that everyone gets a chance to stop by this fall.
Yeah, it's great. Lots of fun experiences, great performers, and sushi. I believe there's sushi too. So,
There might
what
be
do you
sushi.
think? No pressure, but what's next for Tokyo Gardens and your family as far as your legacy or business looking forward? Besides, I know you just moved to a new and big headquarters, but.
Well, yes, we have a new building. We're really proud of that because it gives us room to expand. It's so big I get lost, and it looks empty because we've got so many seats to fill. So we are actively hiring and trying to find people who want to come work in the sushi business. But one of the things that is interesting about our business, we're not the only sushi company that's out there. There's other companies that do this. We chose to really focus on Texas, and that goes against, if anyone's learning business strategy and go to market or market entry, you really wouldn't do that. That's
Well, why not? Why is it against the grain?
because you would want to go after the biggest market. You'd want to go to work with a national grocery. HEB is only in Texas, by the they don't have stores in Louisiana. They don't have a store in Arizona. You'd want to work with a big national chain.
Like Kroger or something like
Yeah,
that?
I won't name them, but the
Sorry.
you
Winn-Dixie, yeah, East Coast.
But again, we go back to our roots. We go back to thinking that we think we know how to serve Texans. We think we know how to do really well in this space, and that's why Texas is like the worst kept secret in the country. That it's one of the fastest growing economies, one of the largest economies, and people just don't pay enough attention to it. And so we made that bet, I'd say 15 years ago, and we were really nervous at the time, but I think it's paid off. I mean, look at how much we're expanding, not just in Houston, but the economy in Dallas is growing too, and we're in the best position to take advantage of it because we invested so heavily in this space many, many years ago.
And are you in other states right now? So
We have a few other accounts, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you looking to more aggressively expand in other states, or are you feel like there's still room to grow in Texas?
I think that there's still room to grow in Texas. And again, like all the business strategists will tell me that like this is wrong, you're too concentrated, you need to expand, you need to diversify. But we have our hands full just working and trying to serve HEB and trying to serve the Texas market. Everything that I read about, the Kinder Institute just released their survey last week, and it talks about the diversity, the growth, and how attractive Houston is as a place to live and start a family, start a job. And so we think that it's green lights ahead for Houston, for Dallas, for all the major cities here for the next 5 to 10 years at least.
That's great. Now, does anybody have any questions? I think we want to move. Oh, right. Go over.
Oh, where's the Japanese festival going to be? It's actually I think there's a couple of different parts, but by the theater or the Miller Outdoor Theater, and then I don't know exactly the layout, but there's a few sections. It's grown over the years.
And then like the reflection pond right there.
Yeah,
Some of that
yeah, right.
goes
But
around.
there's some booths along the pond.
Other questions from the audience? No secret.
No one wants to talk about Sando.
Oh yeah, what? Oh, okay, she had a question.
Great. Thank you, Robert, for being here. And as you know, I know your dad so well. I knew him so well. And you've left such a legacy as a family. What are some of the other things that you're going to be doing besides the Japanese Festo, besides what you've done for Asia Society and your family, your mom? What other things do you have in store, aside from growing business? I know there's a lot of things that your dad used to think about, so where do you go next?
Well, my dad's core belief, with all the things that he did with the community and Asians, was, he said that he just wanted Americans to like Japanese and for Japanese to like Americans. It was just about encouraging friendship and understanding between two different cultures. A lot of work with the Asia Society and other organizations in town, and trying to tell more stories through our sushi. I think that there's a lot that we can do. I'd say the big project I'm working on right now is getting ready for the World Cup next year, which is Houston's going to host, I think, 7 or 8 games. Each game, if you don't know, is like more popular than, like, it's equivalent to a Super Bowl. So it'd be like Houston having 7 Super Bowls over like a 21-day period.
What will you be doing for, or can you not say yet? I'm not sure how.
We can't talk about it yet, but
Okay.
hopefully there'll be sushi involved there
Somehow,
somewhere.
soccer ball shaped sushi.
Hopefully, something like that.
Yeah. I know. Yeah.
Thank you again for being here. You started off in the conversation about sort of laws of dealing with hate and separation, and Houston is so diverse, and so sometimes we don't always feel it, but we know that there is a lot of work to still be done as a representative of a specific community and even a larger one. What do you see for the future of, like, what we can do to promote diversity and what we can do at a local, state level to prevent these very hateful policies? Because I feel like that's something that what might be happening, and I'm sure you've interacted with some of these kind of level, like, political sort of issues along the way.
Well, first of all, Maya's husband is doing a great job of that.
He's trying. It's
And-
hard.
and so she's probably the best resource for that. But I think being visible and showing up is really important. There's a lot of things that happen in the community that people just don't show up to. And if you know, like the Chinese Community Center held a public safety event last week. And a lot of people showed up to it. It was really encouraging because the mayor spoke, the DA spoke, and there were a lot of public officials that were there. That's really good because it shows the people in government, the officials in government, that the community cares. So I think the first thing is just showing up and making your presence known, and encouraging other people to show up. That's really the first step, because it's difficult to say, go and talk and give this speech or talk or do this thing, and that's asking a lot. But showing up is I think it's pretty easy.
If my husband was here, he would tell you, to go vote and run for office, right? Those would be 2 things that he would say, and also just, I think it's so hard for so many people in our communities, right? You're focused on raising your family and working, your job, your career. So finding that time to be engaged in whatever capacity you're willing to be engaged in is a challenge. And I think the biggest challenge is to challenge yourself to push beyond your comfort level. If you feel like you need to go to a rally on a Saturday, even inconvenient, maybe, take your kid along and go. If that means asking your neighbors to make sure they're voting for every election, make sure they do that. You have to kind of go, even with the most recent anti-Asian land laws that just passed in the legislature that the governor is expected to sign, the folks who were, I know my husband, who's a state rep, was trying to organize people, and a lot of people in the Asian community were like, well, we fought it 2 years ago, we're tired, we don't want to do that, and you just can't be tired, right? As MLK says, the arc of history, bends toward justice, but it takes a long time, it takes a lot of work, so you just have to always show up, and I think that's the challenge, and that's why I was always so impressed by your dad, Glenn, because he was one of the first people I met when I moved to Houston, and he's always there to support every Asian American, and in whatever capacity, right? And he would always tell me, "Hey, thanks for making me proud." So he was always telling me that he was proud of me for my work in television, things like. He would say that to every Asian person, young person, saying, "You're an inspiration." And while we're like, "Well, but you're pretty cool too. You're pretty awesome," you know. And I think so. Always remember that. That's the story.
Well, yeah, it's because, especially in Texas, there aren't a lot of Asian Americans in public office, and so just like I said, how the Houston community rallies together. You know, it doesn't matter which race, which Asian group it is. You know, we want to support that person because for the public, for a lot of people, they represent all Asians. You know, that's the stereotype. You know, like when I was in school, you know, I was the only Asian person in school. And so I was like the representative at the UN. I was like the one that represented the Asians, all the Asians. I got asked about Chinese and Korean culture, you know.
Do you know when Chinese New Year's is and all that
Yeah,
stuff, right?
all those things, you know. And so you know, yes, being visible and being in public office.
Other questions?
Is your family related to the people? Is your family related? Like is your family related in the architecture and building of the Tokyo Gardens and Herman Park?
Tokyo Garden.
Gardens at Hermit Park. You mean the Japanese garden in Hermit
Yes,
Park?
that's what I meant
That
to
was
say.
from the Japanese. You talked.
Not related to the park itself, but we've done a lot to promote the park and help preserve and maintain it. It's actually a really it's a very difficult and expensive park to maintain. You know, we have to bring in Japanese landscapers to come in and do all the special, you know, treatments to the park. And so I encourage everyone to support the Herman Park Conservancy, but especially the Japanese Garden, because it's a very special place. It's beautiful, and in order to keep it that way, it takes a lot of money.
Does UHD offer sushi in the cafeteria? I have to ask. Oh yeah, good.
So the okay.
One of our advisory council members could not make it, but they wanted me to ask Robert this. What advice would you give to young entrepreneurs? Maybe they're in the room, and some of them maybe not so young, but some future entrepreneurs, especially those from immigrant communities who want to build something in business. What advice would you offer them, Robert?
I mean, I think that you know, anyone that's trying to do something, strike out on your own. You have to know that you're going to be your biggest cheerleader. You know, whatever it is. I stumbled into entrepreneurship, even though my family is full of entrepreneurs. I'm a bad employee. I failed at every other job until I realized that, like, I can't work for somebody else. But
Because I remember when I first met you, you were like living in Seattle or
Yeah.
working for one of those other big companies out in the West Coast.
But you know, when you're starting a business, you have to form a relationship with a banker or someone who sells you your insurance, or you know, your landlord or your investors. And all those people want you to succeed, but no one wants you to succeed harder than yourself, and you have to remember that. At the end of the day, you have to stand up for yourself, and you have to be you have to look in the mirror and tell yourself, like, you can do this, you know.
And if you could go back and think about, like, were there any particular type of classes or lessons when you were in school that was really particularly helpful? Anything that stands out?
Oh, I was a bad student too.
Okay. We don't believe you because you're Asian. No, I'm kidding. Well, ask your mom. We got a question back there.
Yeah, okay, so the one business lesson we did learn is that restaurants are really, really tough. Really, really tough. You know, my parents never left the restaurant, didn't get to go on vacation, didn't get to go out of town. And this is how a lot of people start, you know, their entrepreneurial journey or continue to do, is start a restaurant. because it's a very easy thing to begin. It's a very, very difficult thing to sustain. And while I love the idea of starting another restaurant, I'm not sure I'd want to go back and do it all over again.
It was a lot of hours.
Yeah, it's really tough. And maybe one day. I mean, I'm not going to say no. Maybe one day it could happen. But you know, Tokyo Gardens as a restaurant had its time, and it had a wonderful history, a 32-year run, which is pretty long in restaurant years. And so I'm happy to. I don't want to be the guy that tries it again and then fails miserably. Like oh yeah, we had a good run.
Stop while you're ahead.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
And how many staff do you have now? Like, or you said you're still looking for more. There's never enough, or
It's never enough. It's so hard to find people. It's so hard to find good people. And you know, I mean, we have lots of sushi chefs, but at our corporate office, you know, it's hard to find people that want to work in, you know, food scientists, nutritionists, dietitians, data scientists or data analysts, and people that want to work in the kitchen as a corporate R&D chef. These are jobs that just, you know, there aren't too many of them out there. There's not too many in Houston, so it's not as well known about that kind of opportunity.
and how do you develop like your recipes and things?
So our R&D team, and we probably have the largest R&D team of any like sushi company. We travel all around the world, all around Houston, to discover what's popular, what's trendy, what's new. I consume a lot of social media because social media informs me a lot about like what people are eating and what's popular. And the interesting thing is when we go to places like Japan or Korea, first of all, you know, they lead with culture. I mean, music, fashion, and oftentimes food. And so we see something that's popular, that's really trendy in Korea, and 2 years later, a year later, it'll be in California, and a year after that, it'll be in Texas. If we do our job right, we can launch something just when it's starting to get popular here.
So what's the next thing you're going to launch, or can you not talk about
We
it?
can't talk about it.
All these things you can't talk about.
I can talk about Sando.
Okay, talk to us about Sando.
Well, so I don't know if does everyone know about the Sando incident? No? Okay. We launched this product that it's a Japanese dessert sandwich. It's not milk bread, but it's bread with cream
Like whipped cream?
Whipped cream and strawberries. So it's a dessert, and it got a lot of heat because we were criticized for not making this dessert the traditional Japanese way. And Reddit blew up. Just don't read Reddit. It's a really dark place. But we thought it was funny because none of our other products are like that. Like I said before, we do things that are Texas inspired. The formula for success has always been to take a product and Texify it to some degree, and that's what we did. We used HEB private brand ingredients, and we made it Texas sized, and we thought that customers would love it. And then the outpouring, the comments were about, this is not traditional. This is not like what I get when I go to Japan. This is different than the convenience store. We want the traditional thing. And so we took a step back and said, we're going to take a look at this and try and find something that works. And so we're working on version 2. The funny thing that I'll say is when we did a blind taste test, we went after the article.
Well, I was not invited to this blind taste test. Yeah, I'll volunteer for the next, for part 2. No, I'm kidding.
So the surprise is we went to every Asian bakery and bought all the different types of bread that they have, did a blind taste test, and guess which one won? The original.
Yeah.
So why were all the comments about it? And this is the thing this is why we have such a large R&D team. The customer continues to surprise us. We think that we know so much about our customers, and yet they are constantly surprising us. If we knew, after 100 years of market consumer research, you think that we'd be able to know everything about everyone. You think like Amazon would just be able to know everything about you, but there's still so much that we don't know about the customer. And so that's why I'm not upset, but just amazed at how much, we continue to learn about this.
Do you think, like, just because as consumers have been able to travel more around the world and see more things, that their expectations have changed over the decades,
Oh, absolutely. The expectations have gone way, way up. Because of the internet, because of how easy it is for people to travel these days. The familiarity, the knowledge that customers have coming into the grocery store and talking about sushi is way, way high. So we learned that we have to meet those expectations too. So we're trying to balance that, because it's it's hard to sell the absolute best authentic sushi at $9.99. We're getting close. We're getting really close. But we try to find a compromise between that.
And I'm sure right now, with everything that's going on, it's also a challenge to get.
Yeah, tariffs are really tough. It's rocking the business. Most of the seafood in America is imported, and so it's a real challenge. The biggest thing is that every single day there's a different piece of news that comes out, and so you just don't have any predictability. You don't have any certainty of what's going to happen. I will say though that you can feel pretty confident that you'll find sushi on the shelves tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. But it's gonna take a lot of hard work from our team and especially our procurement team to make sure that it all gets there the way it's supposed to.
If we don't have any, well, got one more question over here.
Yes, I want to go back to the beginning of your conversation where you were talking about your grandparents and their silence about their internment camp experience. I don't want to mess it up because I wrote it down, so I can make sure I ask right. But what advice would you give to students who are navigating silence in their own families while trying to understand their identities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, and I don't want to tell you exactly what to do, but from my own experience, not talking about it was worse. There's a lot of history that didn't get captured because my grandparents aren't around anymore. So I don't get to ask the questions that I wanted to. I didn't know what I wanted to ask. I didn't know that I wanted to ask these things until they had already passed. So if you can find a way to speak to your family about these things, I would encourage you to find a way to do that. I'm sure for a lot of people it's incredibly difficult. I mean that's why they don't talk about it. But you have to remember that if they don't share those stories with you, who are you going to share them with? What are you going to be able to tell your kids one day? Because you want to let the future generation know what happened. They want to hear it from you.
What do you think your grandparents would say to you today? Seeing.
I'm not sure. They would. I mean, the first thing they would say is like, "You're selling sushi in a grocery store?" I think they'd be really proud, that of all the success, of course, but I think they'd be really surprised at how popular sushi has become, especially in Texas.
And the hot Cheetos? Would they be?
In the hot Cheetos. They would, oh my God. At the restaurant, they didn't do anything like that. It was more traditional.
Well, how about a round of applause for Robert? Thank you so much. So insightful.